Like many of you guys, I have been playing Master Duel quite a bit over the last few days, and I've almost gotten to Platinum 1 with my favorite deck of all time, Code Talkers. If I can keep up this win-to-loss ratio, I should be Platinum 1 by tomorrow. But I figured I'd go ahead and show you guys my Code Talker list. It's really good for the current format. It's also pretty cheap to put together. The majority of the deck comes out of the same box, and the core of the deck only requires 4 URs, and of those URs, only Signet Mining requires you to have multiple copies. All of the other URs that you play in the deck are URs that you're probably going to be getting regardless of what deck you're playing. General staples, hand traps, that sort of stuff. But this deck is really strong in the current format. Most of the high tier meta decks right now in Master Duel lose to you going first and giving them Ibli. Decks like Drytron really don't have a solid out to it, especially if you have a counter trap to back it up. This deck is also exceptional at going second. This deck can break boards like nothing else. And while it may look like it loses to Max C, I am running 7 outs to Max C in the main deck, and you could run 8. Plus, if you do get Max C'd and you don't draw one of your outs, you do have a lower investment plays that you can make, which will win you the game against a lot of decks. So if you've never seen Code Talkers in action before, this deck makes some of the most ridiculous turn 1 boards of any deck in the game. It also does so while playing around a good amount of hand traps. Ibli is a monster that you're capable of giving to your opponent, and the controller of this card cannot special summon monsters except for link monsters. The fact that your opponent has a monster will block off cards like Lightning Storm and Infinite Impermanence, but your opponent also can't hit you with cards like Gamma or Nibiru. This is also the primary way that we're going to be locking out decks like Virtual World, Drytron, and Eldritch. We also get to see Ibli's summoning animation twice every single time we play it, which is so nice. Ibli is my favorite card in the entire game. I am just very content with the fact that they gave it a unique summoning animation. Anyway, after giving our opponent Ibli, we are pretty much free to combo off to our heart's content. This deck can make things like Firewall Dragons that are unaffected by opponent's card effects, extra linking the opponent, searching counter traps. This deck can do it all. And that's the primary reason why I think this deck has been doing so well in Ranked. You see, you don't have access to a side deck in Ranked right now, and that means that 2 kinds of decks have the biggest advantage. Decks that have a lot of versatility, and decks that can make really ridiculous turn 1 boards. So the fact that this deck can make boards as ridiculous as it does going first while playing around a wide variety of hand traps makes this deck a contender to begin with. But you add that on top of the fact that this deck is very capable of going second and breaking boards of decks like Eldritch and Sky Striker. This deck is just in a really good meta placement currently in Master Duels. And it's not even really all that popular at the moment. I have played nothing but this deck since I got the game. Just trying to figure out how it worked with meta, what cards were best, that sort of stuff. And in that entire time, I have yet to face another Code Talker player on the ladder. And I wasn't even really losing games until I got into Platinum. Now, I'd say the one issue with this deck is that it is really complicated to play. Going first, you do need to have your turn 1 combos memorized, and you need to be able to do variations of them based on what you start with, what you might need to search, what you're trying to end with, all sorts of stuff like that. Going second, you need to be able to play around interruptions. It's really easy to OTK in this deck. A single copy of Lady Debug is an access Code Talker at 5300 that can attack 2 times, so it's over 10,000 damage. But you also just need to be able to throw other cards on the board, bait out your opponent's negates in order to get there. But there's a lot that you can get if you know what you're doing. You can set up trap negates, you can make access codes that are unaffected by card effects, you can make your monsters untargetable, you can make it to where they can't be destroyed. You can do all sorts of amazing stuff. And you can do absurd amounts of damage. You can use Update Jammer in order to make your monsters attack multiple times. And you can recycle Update Jammer with Transcode Talker. So if you use Transcode Talker, make the Transcode Talker with an Update Jammer, bring back the Update Jammer with the Transcode Talker, you can make another monster that can then attack twice again. but I do think it's worth learning. Clearly I'm biased, this is my favorite deck in the entire game. It's the first deck that I built in Master Duels, but if you're a newer player, this deck will teach you a lot about the game, and it's something that you won't get bored of too quickly. It's also something that you can build up to if you start with a Link starter deck at the beginning of the game, and you can pretty much jump into Ranked with an incomplete version of this deck and still do pretty well while you're working on getting the rest of it. I was jumping into Ranked before I had a completed version of this deck at earlier levels of Ranked, and I was doing completely fine. This deck also has some unique aspects to it that you're just not going to see in a lot of other competitive decks. For example, I think this is the only deck that extra links and can compete at a competitive level. Additionally, there are monsters in this deck that can be used as link materials from your hand. If you are interested in the deck, if this helped convince you to try and play it in Master Duel, I have a lot of content on this channel to teach people how to play Code Talkers. I have combo videos, I have deck profiles, I have all sorts of stuff just like that. And obviously, when we get more content for Master Duels, I plan on doing update videos for Code Talkers once we get heatsoul, if we get like TCG formats, alternative formats, any stuff like that. I also plan on putting out more content for Master Duel once I start getting a few more decks put together. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked what you saw, consider commenting, or subscribing. It really helps the channel grow, and I know I appreciate it.